Hey there, welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show. If you are tired of chasing buy-in, frustrated by teams who just can't seem to get on the same page, or over the constant struggle of holding people accountable without feeling like you're micromanaging, this is the show for you. I'm Casey Watts, team leadership expert and the host of this show. I specialize in clarity, collaboration, and character, and I help leaders just like you take teams from chaos to cohesion, from frustration to alignment, so teams can actually work together toward a common purpose instead of against each other as though they are functioning in different organizations. Whether you lead a single team or a team of teams, on this show, we talk about strategies that are going to help you create a culture where accountability and autonomy go hand in hand. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation and build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's show. I am so pumped for you to join us. I am joined by Kurtis Hewson, who's going to tell us all about himself, all about his company, and all about how to establish a collaborative response to impact all learners. Kurtis, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Casey. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to dive in here in just a little bit, but I've started this new thing on the show where I go through a round of this or that questions. Are you ready?
I certainly am. Fire away.
Okay. So the first two questions, we're really just going to think about life in general. Okay. Do you prefer sweet or salty snacks?
Salty. That one was easy.
And what would be your favorite salty snack?
It would be nachos.
Okay. Just like nachos, tell me about the kind of nachos that you would prefer, because there are the, concession stand nachos, and then there are restaurant style nachos.
Oh yeah, it's restaurant style nachos for sure. But if I'm just needing a snack, and I try to stay away as much as I can, but just a bag of Doritos is great too. So yeah, salty and towards the nachos, but the more cheese, the better.
I love it. Okay. Here's another one. Are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
Morning for sure. And the funny part of that is that was never me until I became a administrator, when I realized that getting in early helped me tremendously to get accomplished what I needed to accomplish. So definitely mornings.
Yeah. Let's talk about how early though. Like when you say you're a morning person, how early is morning?
I've just started the routine myself of 5:30. Get up, do a workout, a shake, engage in writing, and then get dressed for the day and whatever I need to do. But I've been trying to get that as a consistent routine for not just health, but for opportunity to write and generate content around the work that I assume we'll talk about here in a little while.
Yeah, there's nothing like having a really good morning routine. It is my favorite because I'm a morning person too.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that lightly because I think sometimes when people, when you tell people you're a morning person, they envision that you are a happy morning person, but it takes me I need a solid hour, if not more, to just be by myself.
And when I say morning person, I'm referring more to productivity and effectiveness than pep and rah-rah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, some of our more educational leadership questions. Do you prefer leading or coaching individuals and getting to a really deep personal level, or do you prefer leading and coaching teams with a wide variety of dynamics?
This will not be a surprise to you based on the work that I do, but it's teams all the way. I feel you have a greater impact for teams. And the other nuance with this is I believe in a team, everyone's an expert and everyone's a learner. So I can help contribute through the support and work that I do, but there's others within the team that we can leverage their expertise as well. So I'm much more of a facilitator than a one-to-one coach, although I do some of that work too.
Yeah, there's just nothing like asking questions that probe thinking and seeing where people can take that.
Absolutely. And
Simply,
I think the team dynamic, it just elicits so much more creativity and innovation
yeah,
if
and
the team
even
is operating well.
yeah, even teams that are not operating well, like I find that that's exciting to me, because I'm
Mhm.
thinking, man, let's really figure out why we're not functioning well. And it's like fitting puzzle pieces together.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, last one. And this is one that I posted earlier today. So you've probably had a little bit of time to think about it. And I think it's going to segue really well into our topic tonight. Would you rather have a team that's incredibly creative, but a little chaotic, or a team that's super structured, but not as innovative?
So I was thinking about this as I saw it posted in LinkedIn there as well. And I think it's not a question of this is one where I don't know if it's a this or that, because I think you can have both. And what I mean by that is I believe that when you have structure and clarity, it allows innovation to happen. And when a team says, oh, but we collaborate so effectively already, my response is, oh my goodness, if you added some structure and some other pieces to it, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. You will take your efforts to a much greater level. So I will take structure every day, because once you have structure, you can build on it and get to levels of innovation and creativity that I don't think is always possible. It can happen for sure, but
Yeah.
not with consistency and predictability like it does
Mhm.
when you've got strong structures. And I know that I'm preaching to the right person when it comes to create clarity, and the results are magnified.
Yeah, I really like that you said consistency and predictability, because we don't want it to happen by chance.
No,
Because if it is happening by chance, then it's a one and done kind of thing. We want it to be long lasting, but it can't. The results of those kinds of meetings, if you will, or collaborative activities can't be long lasting if it's just happening by chance.
I also would suggest that it's really hard to deal with transitions of people joining the team or leaving the team if you don't have structures and systems in place.
Yes.
And you know this as well as anyone, that one person being introduced can totally change the dynamic. And if you
Mhm.
don't have, for lack of a better word, operating procedures for how the team operates, that one shift can totally shift the effectiveness of a team.
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring that up. I had a conversation with a teacher recently who had moved grade levels, and she's just naturally a leader. Of course, all leaders have work to do, and she has so much growth to do as a leader, but she's still young and will have time for that. But every time she moves to a new grade level or a new team, she tends to take on just naturally that team leader role and
Yeah.
steps in to support as needed, creates the systems that they need in place to function in an organized fashion. Um, and I've seen it's so fascinating to me. I've seen the teams that she's been on transform in the time that she's been on them. The previous grade level and now her current grade level. The problem is when she left the previous grade level, they no longer function in the way they did when she was there. So it's like she owned the systems, she owned the structures, but they didn't have ownership of that. And I think they were completely okay with that because they didn't know any different. It was like, well, so and so is going to take care of this for us. Um, and she just naturally led those teams. But yeah, it's that consistency and predictability. If that's going to be the case, then there has to be a set of structures in place.
Yeah, it's interesting with that too, is I'll often support and coach leaders to with the statement of design your systems as if you won't be here a week from now. The
Yes.
idea of can your systems, structures, processes be sustainable without
Mhm.
you here? That's what you should be striving for if you want to create really, really collaborative cultures, because we know cultures should endure
Mhm.
when people transition in and out.
Yeah. Well, with that said, let's talk about collaborative response.
Yeah.
You have co-authored this book about collaborative response, and I want you to talk to our audience about why you developed this framework and why you believe it's essential for schools.
Yeah, so it's always interesting, and I know you've had this experience too of you put out the book and people go, "Oh, you got all your thoughts into a book," and you go, "Actually, there's about 15 years, 20 years of thoughts that have gone into it." The process of writing it didn't happen until this point in time, but it was back in the mid 2000s. I was a principal coming into a school, a fairly small rural school, about 350 students, and great teachers doing great things for kids. We had a staff that were high degrees of expertise and they loved children. This was not a broken school in any way that the leader had to come and clean up, but we had students slipping through the cracks. We had what I refer to now as isolated islands of excellence, people doing great things, but sometimes a struggle I was having in my room, I didn't recognize that 3 doors down, the solution existed. And again, it wasn't the fault of any person. The school would have said they were very collaborative, but in reflecting back, we were really collegial. People got along, they shared, they helped support, but I think collaboration is much, much deeper than just sharing and getting along. So we began to put structures in place. We learned, we evolved, and eventually we had other schools that were saying, "Can we come see what it is that's happening? Can you explain it to others?" And there were elements of professional learning communities. Response to intervention literature was just starting to take hold at that point. So those influenced, but it ended up becoming a unique framework that really was about responding to the needs of all students, but doing it in a way that was leveraging and continually building the capacity of the entire team. So we framed it as it's collaborative response. It's how we collaboratively respond to the needs of students with the understanding that no child's success should be left to an individual. It should always be related to a team, which led us to our driving mantra of every child deserves a team. I don't know. Have you had a chance to see the TEDx talk? It's been up for a number of years by Rita Pearson about every child deserves a champion.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
and I love it so much. I want to be there.
I love that message, but I'd like to take it one step further. I think the idea of every child deserving a champion is so fundamental in our schools, but if people are trying to do it on their own, it's a recipe for burnout as well. I believe that we can maximize our collective efforts that much more when we create teams. And really intentional and purposeful teams. We often say in collaborative response, the framework is really simple. The actualization of it is what's incredibly complex.
Right. As it is with really anything that is worth going after.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're building systems, you start simple, but it doesn't take long before for you to explain what's the system of response that you have in your school. And oh boy, sit down. This is going to take a bit of time to really share how everything is connected and aligned.
Yeah. Okay, you're dropping all kinds of nuggets of gold, just like mic drops everywhere. And I want to be sure if you are listening and you have a chance, like if you're listening live and you have a chance, or maybe you're watching the replay on YouTube and you've got a chance to pop this into the comments, I just want you to write in the comments one of these 2 phrases, either one that resonates most with you. First of all, isolated islands of excellence is just the most perfect statement that we might drop in the chat. And we see it all the time. I experience it almost everywhere I go. There are just pockets of excellence. And these people don't even know what's happening in other classrooms. And they don't have enough of a collaborative culture to be able to discuss what they're doing in their classroom or even recognize that what they're doing is excellent work. So isolated islands of excellence. And if you are experiencing that on your campus, then let me tell you, Kurtis is someone to reach out to. Later in the show, he's going to be sharing a little bit about how to connect with him. But guys, you can take down the silos, break down the silos, and create a culture of collaboration. And this is one way to do it, to reach out to Kurtis and work with him. The other statement that you dropped was every child deserves a team. Is that right? Was that the other one?
It is. And we have to understand that I don't mean in a school of 500 that we have 500 individual teams. No, of course not. It's the understanding that we create highly intentional and aligned team structures so that no single child is ever the responsibility of an individual teacher. There's always a team that is supporting every student. And you and I both know that for our high need students, our at-risk students, that doesn't seem unnatural to create a team to help support them. I think it can go further so that every child is impacted positively by highly, highly intentional structures of team within our schools.
Yeah. Okay. Are you all right with me going off script a little bit?
Yeah, I would love it.
Okay. I want to know, in your opinion, like, okay, let me just say it out loud, and then I can rephrase it if I need to. So often when teachers or leaders think about collaboration, their go-to thought is PLCs.
Yes.
How is collaborative response, in your opinion, different than the typical idea of PLCs?
Yeah, so this is going to go back to where I started at the start of the podcast, is I don't see PLCs or collaborative response. I see and what I mean by that, and we see it all the time, schools that have high functioning PLCs in place, when we share our framework, they go, oh, this is the missing piece that we had. And we're not saying dismantle your PLCs. In fact, we're saying build upon them. So critical in the collaborative response, there's 3 foundational components. And if you just bear with me, I'll kind of give a real quick Coles notes. We have in our visual framework, it's 3 puzzle pieces. The first puzzle piece is collaborative structures and processes. I'm going to come back to that in a second. The second is data and evidence. When we're in these teams, do we have data and evidence that are informing our conversations? And I'm a big believer in data-informed conversations, not data-driven, because I don't want to lose the professionalism of the teachers and the staff in those conversations. Then the third component is continuum of supports. And the idea that, can we start to clearly articulate what are the supports that we have within our school for, again, consistency and high degrees of clarity in whatever priority area. So we go back to the collaborative structures and processes. And I believe, and I've seen this over and over and over again, every school, and I don't care if you have 20 students or 5,000, every school needs 4 layers of team. These 4 layers are our first layer we refer to as collaborative planning. And the idea is we need opportunities for teachers to come together on a regular schedule, or whatever that looks like within your school, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, however you do that. But for teachers to come together, look at overall data and determine what are the next steps, the adjustments that we want to make in our instruction. Any school with strong functioning PLCs go, pooh, we've got the collaborative planning layer covered, which is great news. I'm going to skip the second layer, and I'll come back. The third layer we call the school support team. And it may be that in a large school, you have multiple school support. Within my own school, it was myself as principal, the assistant principal, our learning support teacher or special education facilitator, whatever your language is using that in your school. And then we also had a family school liaison. The 4 of us every week would meet. And the intention of this layer of team is to focus on students needing supports beyond the classroom. Oftentimes it's through a referral system that we have in place, or, as a principal, I've got 3 that are on my hot list that we need to attend to, and we create a really intentional team structure there. The 4th layer, every school, I don't care where you are, has the 4th layer, and we refer to it as the case consult layer. And you might not call any of your meetings these titles, they're categories. The case consult is anytime we come together with one student on the agenda and we get the right people around the table. Oftentimes it's in response to crisis or to exceptional needs. But I would suggest without these layers, schools just naturally turn to the one kid at a time, which is unsustainable. I had one school that they had really good meeting structures, but when they held it up to these categories, they found out most fit in that case consult, one student at a time. And the school, it was almost like a light bulb went off of, this is why we feel like we're playing whack-a-mole, why it feels like we're in such a reactive state all the time. It's because we're missing the other layers. Yeah. So now I would love, Casey, if we have the opportunity or time, to really talk about the second layer, because it's what makes collaborative response, it's the driving function within our overall collaborative response framework. And it's a very unique meeting structure that we refer to as the collaborative team meeting. And the idea of this is, let's go back to your original question about the PLCs. Typically, in most schools, PLCs teams are formed by people who are teaching similar grade levels or similar subjects, or in a small school, there might be an elementary team and a secondary team, whatever that looks like within your school. In the collaborative team meeting, we try and mix people up. And the structure looks like this. We first start off with, in fact, all of these meetings have things like norms, roles, clear agendas, all the things that I know when you talk about moving a team from chaos to coherence, all are important. But this meeting starts with, all right, everyone's going to bring forth a celebration with a student, and a facilitator is going to ask, why did that happen? So Casey, when you say, I'd like to celebrate Douglas, he's just really, I've seen such incredible growth for him. We're going to ask you a few questions about what you mean by that. And then we're going to ask, so what did you do? And what we're trying to do is reinforce high degrees of efficacy of people being able to see where they're making impact and then articulate what they think that they're doing. Now, that's gold for others in the room when I say, well, I started utilizing a checklist in the classroom that really helped this student get organized and focused. Someone in the room is going to say, I'd love to see a copy of that. I'd love to make an adjustment. And then we move to a very specific meeting structure that looks like this. I go, Casey, who's a student that you've brought? And everyone comes ready for this conversation. There's pre-meeting organizers that get sent out. Who is a student? Don't tell us the name yet, but what's a key issue that you're experiencing? And usually we get to a place where the overall focus of the meeting is in alignment with school priorities. So if my school is really working on impacting literacy achievement for students, literacy might be our overarching focus, but you come in and say, I have a student, and right now my key issue is being able to recognize letter sounds. Okay, I'm going really simple with this example. Now, we might ask a few questions about what do you mean by letter sounds? And you say, well, the kid can recognize all their letters, but they're getting confused on certain sounds, which then really hurts when they're trying to break down words based on their sounds. So then once we have that key issue clarified, and usually it's very quick, especially when schools get used to the process, then we say to others in the room, who else has a student, just the name, no story, because we're trying to get this not only off an individual kid, but off you, Casey, as a teacher. That is not your problem. It's a shared key issue. And then we start brainstorming. And I say, one of the things I do in my room is this. And someone else says, I've actually got letters posted around the room, but there's a QR code where the kid can take a device and it'll say the sounds. And someone else will go, that's really interesting. I do something similar with that with some different YouTube videos that I'm using. And someone else will jump in and say, where's the site for that YouTube videos? I'd love to see what that looks like. We go through and we brainstorm. And then we come back to say, Casey, what's one thing that you're going to try as a result of this conversation? And we get really clear actions. Then we say, Kurtis, for the student or two that you had in relation to this, what's an action you're taking away? So it's 100% solutions focused, action oriented. And this other additional layer has such an incredible impact in schools. In fact, we often say we're going to reduce the number of meetings in your school by adding one more. And what we mean by that is by adding this collaborative team meeting structure, and it's usually every 3 to 5 weeks, think monthly. We're going to reduce the number of reactive meetings that are happening within our building. If you think of those layers, the meetings at the third and fourth layer, we start building up capacity for the overall team through this process. It's a really, really powerful process, but each of these 4 layers are important. That was a really long-winded explanation to try and help place it's not PLCs or this, it's PLCs and.
Yeah. If you're listening to this on replay, you can't see me, but I feel like I've started back here and I'm just consistently moving forward and leaning in more and more and more. And I love this conversation so much I can hardly stand it. And I'm trying to figure out, man, where do I go from here? Because we could talk about so many important things. I think when you're talking about these, because you answered one of my questions, how often are these collaborative meetings happening? And you said think monthly, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that happens when you have that kind of meeting in the way that you described is, number one, you're creating this safe space where everyone is able to take risks, able to be vulnerable, and you're also giving an opportunity for us to unveil what is happening at face value. Like we're not staying here at surface level. We're giving the opportunity to dig deeper and really unpack the why behind the what.
And the crazy thing, and I see this all the time, is you can have 2 colleagues who have taught for 2 decades across the hallway from one another, but they've never really talked practice. And we get into this conversation and one person will say, well, one of the resources I use or a strategy that I've employed that works really well. And then another person in the room is going to go, that's gold. I hadn't even thought of, and the person who's sharing that is going, it's not that special. It's just kind of something I figured out. But we often say in the collaborative team meeting, everyone is an expert and everyone is a learner. And the fascinating thing is I've been doing this for almost 2 decades now, and I facilitate hundreds of these meetings, modeling them, helping support them within schools. And everyone, I walk away with something I've never heard before. It's fascinating how last week I could be in a room and hear about a website I've never heard, or a strategy where I go, that's brilliant. I've never in my experience heard that before. Mm-hmm. And teachers are amazing people. And this really is such a powerful process to not only support and grow their expertise, but honor and empower it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, making it so much easier to want to come to work every day and not get burned out by feeling like you're doing this on your own, because you're creating teams that are leaving people feeling valued, empowered, and inspired.
And Casey, I know that you know this from the work that you do as well, is if you can create really powerful, structured, formalized opportunities for collaboration, the informal conversations that happen outside of that meeting on a regular basis, they start to look and sound different. People, I saw it myself, of staff that would come into a staff room to vent previously will now come into a staff room to say, hey, I've got this going on. Anyone got any ideas of something I could try? Like, it's transformational for that culture, but it starts with getting really structured and intentional opportunities for collaboration.
Then let's talk about roadblocks. And I know earlier we mentioned it a little bit, like, you know, sometimes you hear things and you're like, yeah, that's good in theory. And you can get to a really good start. You can have a great start to it, but it fizzles. Yeah. So that always, I feel like, could be a roadblock. And that's with anything. That's with anything. You need a plan for implementing something like this, as with anything else, for it to be successful, and you need to be able to follow through with your plan. But what are other roadblocks that you have noticed people facing when they're trying to implement the collaborative response?
Yeah, so a few different things, and I'm going to just repeat and rephrase what you shared there. Not only do we expect that challenges should happen, we actually should expect them too. If you're really making an impactful change in culture, there is going to be difficulties along the way. I often share with schools, we refer to this as implementation dips. They're going to happen, and they're actually easier to deal with if people know, recognize, and understand it's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
I often shared in my own school, the work opened cans of worms that life is actually easier when they weren't open, but they needed to be opened. Instructional practices that had gone unchecked for a long time. And I don't mean necessarily poor. What I mean is getting into messy instructional conversations. So that's the first thing. The second is, and I hear this over and over and over for lessons learned from leaders in this work, is that whole notion of going slow to go fast. The understanding that when people are establishing collaborative response, it's not a 6-month piece of work. This is it. I usually say to leaders, it'll be in your second year where you'll start to see things coming together. And with those 3 pieces, we often say you have to take the pieces apart to explore and understand them. Then the real work comes when you start putting them together and recognizing that it takes time. So don't force it. Go slow.
Yeah.
Go slow with the work that you're doing. The other thing that we see, and it comes with our continuum, is, and this is something that I believe to my core, that schools have to stop tiering kids, tier the supports instead. There is no such thing as a tier 3 kid. There's a kiddo who needs tier 3 supports at this point. And in our collaborative response work, we identify 4 tiers of support. And we often say to schools, don't worry about introducing it yet. Get your meeting structures started first. But in time, we establish 4 tiers. And it's not about taking a traditional 3-tiered, which we see in virtually every RTI and MTSS model, and add one more tier on. No, it's not adding one more. It's taking universal and breaking it apart to tier 1 being, what will we see as the non-negotiables across every classroom? And there won't be 50 things. There'll be 5 to 10. 5 to 10 big rocks that we all agree we will see school-wide. Then tier 2 become, what are all the things that we could do by through the classroom teacher in the classroom. And it's basically, let's articulate what is differentiation. What are the strategies? Tier 3 become the supports provided by someone other than the classroom teacher. And then tier 4 become the supports provided by someone external to the school, either from the district or the division or an external. And then in time, we start aligning the tiers of our continuum with those 4 layers of team. But the biggest roadblock is to understand that doesn't all happen overnight. It takes time, and be comfortable just taking those slow, intentional steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking about the tiers, like, you're saying so many things that I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I mean, you said data-informed instruction earlier, and that, or being data-informed instead of data-driven, that always lights a fire in me when people, and not really. I mean, I can get along with people who say we're data driven, but I'm like,
I can too. Absolutely.
Right, but do we really know what we're talking about when we say that? Like, let's dig a little bit deeper. But that is one of the roadblocks that I think we can come to, is we don't share a common language about some of the things that we're talking about. So when we hear tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we may have a wide variety of ideas or beliefs or definitions of those terms. Case in point, I was working with a middle school in Los Angeles recently, or, well, it was a elementary and middle school campus. But the middle school team that I was working with, one of the things that I talked to them about before I went out there was, what is our common definition of tier 1 instruction? Yeah. Let's put that on the table, so that when I come to meet with you and we're really looking at best practices and our non-negotiables, and we're creating a map for how we're going to implement these over time, we don't have to go through the work of deciding what we mean by tier 1 instruction. We're not doing any guesswork. And lo and behold, as we were doing the Zoom, like a pre-conference, I put that in the chat, like, put in the chat what your definition of tier 1, what does it mean to you? And someone said, I can't remember exactly what they said, but in their mind, tier 1 was students who were your most struggling students. And I was like, wow. And there were like 3 other definitions, or some people who said, I don't know what tier 1 means. And I was thinking to myself, wow, we're working in schools and we don't have a common language around that. that's where we've got to start. But we can't really have significant impact in these collaborative meetings if we don't share a common language. So I could totally see that as a roadblock that you would want to address.
Absolutely. And actually, this is where most of my work happens now, is working with districts who say, we don't want just a common language across classrooms in a school. We want it across schools.
Yes.
And so how do we get, again, that high degree of clarity, which allows us to attend to consistency and predictability here for us? And man, when you get common language that exists throughout an organization, it is powerful. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm a big believer that systems endure when people move, and this is a powerful system that can get put in place. And one of the questions I often get, Casey, is, yeah, but doesn't that take away teacher autonomy? And I would argue no. In fact, I think it values it even further, because the non-negotiable is, and let's say like a simple one in my school was, students will have access to a variety of reading materials in every classroom. Essentially, we said we all agree we will have a classroom library. But how you set it up in your kindergarten classroom is going to look different than in my grade 6 classroom. There's still huge degrees of autonomy within it, but you're giving a consistent frame to work from. And when we get into these collaborative team meetings and someone says, in my classroom, I do this, there's opportunity for you in your head to go, that won't work for me. But that's okay. We don't have to say that out loud, because there's going to be an idea where you're going to jump in and say, that's gold. And even better, when we get good at the process, it's, I'd like to take that as an action, but I need help. Yeah. I would love to have a chance to see that in someone's room, or for someone to help me. This is when you know you have that high degree of vulnerability and trust built in your teams, where we honor and acknowledge that everyone in this room has expertise and is doing all that they can for kiddos, but no one has this all figured out.
Right. Yeah. There's freedom within structure.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So, I got so caught up in our conversation. I don't even think, I know I didn't even ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so if anyone hasn't Google searched yet, Kurtis Hewson, and lead learner, co-founder of our organization Jigsaw Learning, which we support and work with schools across North America and beyond in establishing this collaborative response framework. And it's always a little bit uneasy when you talk about, and you have a company or a business where that wasn't necessarily the intent. It just kind of organically emerged when schools just kept asking, can you come show us how to do that? Yeah. And then the beauty of it is, working through each of those scenarios over the last few years, you see things where you go, that's amazing. We're going to incorporate that into the process. So the collaborative response framework today looks nothing like it did from its early genesis point. And there's so many times where I go, oh man, I wish I could go back to previous self in that 15 to 20 years ago. Yeah. Because if I could implement there what I know now, it would have been at an incredibly different level.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that same way about the clarity cycle framework. And I know too, it's going to have probably some other iterations as the years go on. Of course. I know I told you before we started the show, I'm trying to keep it at 35 minutes. We're just going to ignore that, because I still want to talk about a couple of things, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm totally great.
Okay. Here's another roadblock that I want to mention or get your thoughts on. Let's say, or actually, let me say it this way. Do you feel as though sometimes people come with so many varied experiences, sometimes negative mastery experiences from like previous meetings, previous schools, and it becomes hard for them to commit to a collaborative response approach?
Yeah, absolutely. And we usually, when we start working with schools, it's always first with leaders to start to understand the framework. And even though you're not going to introduce all the pieces at once, it's important for you to understand how everything connects so that you can cast a vision of what it'll look like when these three foundational components are working. And then we usually say, start with the collaborative team meeting. But typically the first step is, let's do a bit of an inventory. What do you already have in place and where does it already fit? Because we want to demonstrate to not only ourselves, but to our teams that we're not pursuing the latest fad or, the principal that comes back to his staff and says, great news, I read a book, or great news, I attended a conference, and everyone in the room goes, oh, great, now what are we doing? Where are we going here next? I think this one is critically important, is connect what you already have in place. And we find once people are in that collaborative team meeting, even those that are, we've tried this collaboration thing before and it's frustrating, but the structure and the process is so clear and intentional. And we find once people get into those spaces, even those that were resistant starting off, it's not long until third, fourth, fifth meeting where they're opening up. And lots of times I'll see a teacher who's a little bit unsure of the process when it comes to, Casey, what's something you want to try? And their response is, well, I guess you could put me down for that action. I was going to do it already. So yeah, just put that down for me. But in time, through the experience, you see people start to stretch. You see people start to, I'm going to take a bit of a leap and try something or commit to something that I know I'm going to need some help with. So to me, the biggest roadblock is I believe the idea of buy-in is a fallacy, because buy-in to me is I'm selling something and I want for you to buy it. I believe that we shift people's perceptions and beliefs through experiences.
Yep.
And Michael Fullen talks about the idea that behaviors before beliefs. And you and I could sit here, I could spend weeks upon end trying to convince you to change your beliefs, and I get nowhere. But I can create opportunities for you to engage in behaviors. For instance, I do expect that we're going to work into teams and we're going to try this collaborative team meeting. I can set that as an expectation within my school. And through those experiences, I've found, and I've seen it over and over again, people start to shift their perspectives. And this is why that collaborative team meeting is so critical, because I often say it looks like you're talking about kids, but you're really not. You're just using the student to leverage a conversation about practice.
Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. Okay, let's come to a close. For someone who is listening, who wants to start this work, what would you say their very first step would be?
I would go to the website jigsawlearning.ca, and I'll include some links here for you as well, Casey, to follow up with the recording. On that main page, there's a link to a free article that gives what is collaborative response, just kind of a quick overview. And there's also a link to the introductory chapter from the book for free that you can get. The beauty of that intro chapter is there's a link to a companion website that has all the templates, resources, video content from the book that you can access without having to pay anything. But then the book is available there too, and provides a really good overview, tons of school samples that are available from our website too. If you want to dig deeper, we have resources, podcasts, blogs, lots to explore and go deeper.
That's awesome. And guys, this will be in the show notes, but if you want to go to catchingupwithcasey.com/gift vault, you will see the resources that Kurtis has mentioned in this episode right there. So go to catchingupwithcasey.com/gift vault. Again, you'll see that in the show notes. Kurtis, this has been a fantastic episode. Our first together on my show, but definitely not our last. So until next time, tell our audience where they can find you.
I'm on virtually all the socials, either Jigsaw Learning or Hewson K27 is typically the handle, or search for Kurtis Hewson on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the mains. And like I said, on the website, my email address is available if anyone has questions or wishes to reach out. I'd love to engage in conversations about this work.
Okay, perfect. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Casey. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you later, everybody. Bye. Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with KC on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.